Hey, what's going on, guys? I hope you are doing great. So this is the second course video of the web development series. So in this video, we're going to be covering a very important topic called as CSS. So if you're an absolute beginner, I'll help you through this video explaining how you can design a website and make it look good with CSS. Even if you're an intermediate guy, this video would be just perfect for you to brush up the CSS properties and will get your CSS skills a good refresher. Since this is for beginners, you do not really need to know or have any prior knowledge on CSS. So without any delay, let's hit the bullseye. So a few minutes of this video would contain a couple of slides, and I wouldn't recommend you skipping these as you may miss out some crucial infos. So the first point, as I've said, this course would be for beginners, and all you need to know is to have a solid foundation of HTML, or else watching this video will be pointless because even if you get to know a couple of things about CSS, you wouldn't be able to utilize it, as CSS without HTML is like shadow without light. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is it's not possible for me to cover anything and everything that CSS has in a single video. This would already be around an hour, I guess, and so the topics like flexbox, grid, animation, these themselves consume way more than an hour. So I wouldn't want this video to be so long, so I won't be including these. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't teach you all those. So my upcoming videos would be on flexbox, animations, grid, and all the stuff that I won't cover in this video. And so the last point is, as I've said, that CSS is for developers who already know HTML. So this might vary from developer to developer because CSS is mostly dependent on a developer's creativity. So the better you have, the better you design the website. All you need is to have a good foundation of CSS. So what is CSS? So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. So now you may ask, why do we use it? So it is used to style or design our web pages. So basically, if you just have a web page with just bare HTML, that's going to look pretty ugly. So it helps to convert that piece of ugly looking site to something way more beautiful. So now, is it a programming language? So it is a styling language and not a programming language, but with the help of preprocessors like Sass and less, which basically interpret or compile all those stuff that you write in Sass or less to CSS, which basically allows us to run methods, conditionals, and all those programming stuff which we do in any programming language. So then we need few things to get started with CSS. First up, we need a browser. So for this video, I'm going to be using Chrome or Firefox, or you can even use Safari or Edge depending on your system and depending on your comfort zone. And then we need a text editor. So for this, I'll be using Visual Studio Code. You can have Sublime, Atom, or Notepad++. So for the installation and download part, I won't be explaining how you can download and install VS Code, as I have already explained that in my HTML crash course video. If you have any doubt regarding that, I'll leave the link to my HTML crash course. You can check that out and get the setup done. So to begin with, I already have a CSS crash course folder created. So I'll just open it up, and I have here two files, index.html and style.css. Just in a sec, I'll be explaining you why we have a separate style.css file. As for now, you can just think that this is the place where we can be styling everything that we need to change this index file. Okay, so once you have these two ready, you're going to open it up with VS Code. So since I have already opened this in VS Code, I'll just open the VS Code on the left, and I'll just have the browser just right next to it. Now I'm going to go to the index.html file, and then I'll just hit exclamation and hit enter, which is going to allow me to have the basic brawler template of the HTML. Now, whenever you are using any CSS or any styling, make sure to have any HTML element, because without HTML, you wouldn't be able to see or any change in your web page. So basically, if you want to style something, you must have some HTML element which you would change with your stylings. So to begin with, I'll just use one h1 tag, which would say hello. And I'll save it, and I'll reload. So this is the hello. So there basically are three ways which you can use to style any index.html or any HTML file. So the first one is inline styling. So by that, I mean that whenever you have any tags in HTML, just like any regular attributes, you can go to any specific tag which you want to change. In this case, I'll be changing this h1. Let's go here, and I use the style attribute. And here, let's say you want to change the color of this. So you're going to just write color, and whenever you hit enter, you're going to have this colon and this semicolon ready. If you don't have, make sure to manually type it out, or else it wouldn't work. So once you have the color, so you basically have to pick with any name. So whichever color you want to use, you can basically type the name of it. You can either have the hexadecimal code of it, or you can use the RGB value, which stands for red, green, blue, or you can have the RGBA value, which is red, green, blue, and alpha. So for this, I'm going to be using the name. Let's call it red. And now if I save, since I have live server extension of VS Code, which basically automatically reloads the browser whenever I save the file over here, you can download and install that. It's pretty handy, so it might help you. So this is what it looks when we have the inline styling. The flaw of this is that, let's say you have 10 or 20 or I don't know, maybe 100 or 200 lines of HTML, and you wanted to change every single element into something else. So basically you want to change the style of each of the element. So for that, you need to go to each specific element which you want to change, and then you're going to need to add this styling, and you need to specifically add whichever style you want to pick. So let's say you wanted to change the size of something else. You want to change, let's say the width of any text, any box, I guess, any div, or height of any image, or let's say the color of any text. So you need to go and manually do it out. So now if I have, let's say, another h1 tag which says hey, now if I save, now if I want to change the color of this hey, I need to go specifically and type out here style, and then I need to change the color of this to something else. So let's say I want to change it to brown. Now if I save, I have it brown. So this way of doing stuff is pretty lame and might consume way more time, so it's not efficient. So there's this second way which you can follow, which is called as internal styling. So for this, what we do, just right next to the head tag, we use the style tag. For this, we type style, and here, whichever part we want to change, or whichever tag we want to change the style of, let's say we want to change the h1, we can write h1, use these curly braces, and then inside here, whichever property we want to change, we can just name it. Let's say we want to change the color, we can add color, and hit enter. It's going to have the colon and semicolon, and then here, let's say I want to change these to something else, so let's say green. Now if I save, both of these h1 tag will now change to green. Okay, so this is what we call as internal styling. And the third way, which is the way we're going to follow, and which you should follow whenever you are developing something, so which is the best way, I suppose, which is external styling. So that's the reason why we have another style.css file. Now let's say we have the h1 tag. I want to change the color again, and this time to blue. Now if I save, as you can see, these h1 are still the same. They still look black, and you don't see any color changes. The reason for that is because we have this style.css file, but it doesn't know which file or which HTML file or which h1 of certain HTML file to change the color to. Okay, so for this, we need to specify, or we need to link these two up so that this style knows that, okay, so h1 of this index.file, I need to change that to blue or whatever you have written. So just right next to the meta tag, I'm going to write link and hit enter. It's going to have an attribute called as rel, which basically says that what type of data you are linking, or what type of file you are linking, which is a style sheet, and then you're going to just add the location of the file. So since we have this as style.css, we're going to write the style.css. Now let's say you have another folder created inside this crash course. So let's say the name of the folder is css, so you would write css / and then the name of the style css file. Now if I save, now you can see that once these two get linked, now the h1 are changed to blue. So this is the 3 ways you can style HTML. Now we're going to be looking into the CSS selectors. The way we write is in this specific format. So first we have the selector. In this case, it's a link, the A tag, and you could use paragraph, heading, or whatever depending on your need. And then we have the starting curly brace and then the ending one. And then in between these, we have the property in form of a key value pair. In this case, it is background color, and which has yellow. And these two are separated with colon, and then the value ends with a semicolon. And these two are must. You gotta use these two or else it wouldn't work. And now keep in mind that we're going to be going over a ton of CSS property, so you don't need to stress as of now about what you need to learn or what you need to know. We're going to be discussing everything that you need to know about CSS properties. And now one more thing, that if you have in any specific styling of this sort, let's say you have an A which has a background color of yellow, and then let's say in your HTML file you have multiple A's, so this styling would take impact on all the links that's going to be present in your HTML file. Now keep in mind that if you want to use, or if you want to style any specific link, then you got to use something called as class or IDs, which we're going to be talking this in a bit. Okay, so I have added a bit of text. So this is h1 which says hello world, and paragraph tag with dummy text. And so in the style, first I'm going to go and select the body selector. Now inside here, the first thing that I want to change is the background. Now let's change the background color to a bit dark, this. And now if I hit save, so this is what it would look. Now again, just like any color, the background color could be RGB, RGBA, hexacode, or you could just name the color. And then the next thing that I want to do is change the color. Now color, I want it to have white, so 3F, and I save. So yeah, this is it. Now if you're starting off with CSS, get confused with color and background color. So this color gets applied to only the text that's going to be present inside whichever selector you are applying it. So now in this case, I'm applying the color to the body. Now everything that's going to be inside body would have by default this white color. Now you can again change this. So if I were to change this dummy text to black, I can go and select the paragraph with the paragraph selector, and then I can write here color black, which would make this go black, which I won't do as of now. So this is the color. And then the next thing that I want to show is fonts. Now font family. So font family are basically the fonts that you can use in your website. So there are web safe fonts, which basically CSS allows you by default. So these are the ones. And then there are ones which you can import as a style sheet, like the Google fonts, which you need to bring in as style sheet and then use it in your style. Now, the way you use it is basically you just write the name. So by default, sans serif is the one which all the browsers support. Now, if you want to add something different, so you can write Tahoma. Let's say this is the one I want to use. Where is it? Yeah. So this is Sigu UI, then Tahoma, then Geneva, Verdana, sans serif. So all these are different font families. Now if I were to save this, so this is what it would look like when it has these. Now if I remove this, now if I save, now the fonts are different. Now you may be wondering that why do we have so many fonts if we are just applying one? So the thing is, in your website, the browsers, so generally what happens, not all the browsers support each and every font families. So you need to add in some more. So if by any means, if this doesn't support your browser, then it's going to go and check for the next one. In this case, Geneva. If still it doesn't match, then it's going to go and check for the next one, which is Verdana. And if it still doesn't support, then all the browsers support sans serif, so it's going to go with sans serif. So this is font family, and then you have font size, which is basically the size of the font. So now by default it is 16 pixels, and which you can change. So if I were to write here 20 pixels, oops, now this would grow big. If I write 10 pixel, this would shrink, and so on. Let's keep it to 16 pixels. And then you have font weight. So font weight you can just name, just like if I write here bold and if I save, now the characters are bold. So you can change it with these names like bold, normal, lighter, or you can just give a value like 700 would make it this. You can add 400, 100 and all the stuff. 900 is, I believe, the highest that you can use. So I'll just keep it normal. And so this is how you write fonts and use the font family. Now again, this is a way to use fonts, and there's another way which I'm going to show you in just a bit. So you can also write this as font, and then here all these three properties you can just add in this one. So the first thing that it takes is basically the font weight. Now in this case it is normal. So the second one it takes is the font size. Now it is 16 pixels. Well, let's make it 18 so that you can see the change. And then the third is the font family. Now let's make it sans serif. Now if I save, so this is what it would look. Now if you have any CSS property, just like so, this is the CSS property, and then again I'm overwriting this with this, so this goes invalid, and this is the one which is taking effect now. Okay, now if I will remove this, if I save, you wouldn't see any changes. Now I'll just bring back that and I'll remove it. Okay. And then another thing that I haven't shown you guys is how to use comments in CSS. So for this, you use this backslash asterisk, and then whatever you need to write here, you just write, and then you use another asterisk followed by a forward slash. And this is how you comment in CSS. So I'll just write here comment, just so you guys can see where I have written what comments in CSS. So this is what it would look like. Now, the next thing that I want to show you guys is div. Now in HTML crash course, if you guys have seen my HTML crash course, I haven't explained what are divs. So basically, because we generally use divs in CSS mostly. So if you have a bare HTML site, which you wouldn't find any, but if you have, then you wouldn't generally see any divs, because it's pointless to have divs and not use any styles to it. So div is basically a block element which takes the entire width. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just copy this and I'll create a div, and here I'll just paste in everything. Now, so again, that I want to show you guys another thing, which is class and IDs. Now classes and IDs, as far as the browser goes, or your website, both are identical sort of, but classes you can use mostly everywhere, but IDs, even though you can use it in every place, but these are generally used in specifically in one place. So like if you have any ID as for home, then you would only use that ID in one specific place, and you don't want to use that home ID to anywhere else. So but you can do that with classes, and most frameworks like Bootstrap and stuff, they use classes instead of IDs. So, and I do not use IDs, so you can use only classes and you can use IDs, depends on you. So class, and I want to use this div, and I want to name it box1. Now if I save, so you wouldn't see any change because I have just added a class to this div. Now, the reason we use classes is because let's say you have multiple divs, and the way you can style any specific div, so you can style it with the help of class, or you can add an ID with just saying ID, and then you can add box1 to it. Okay, and you can style it same, so you wouldn't see any difference with classes and IDs because you're just grabbing onto this div with the help of this class or this ID. But it's recommended that you use classes. You can use IDs though. So the reason I'm using classes or ID is because let's say you have multiple divs and you want to style any specific one. So to grab onto that specific div, you have to use some sort of special thing which recognizes that you need to use this div. So for that, we use classes. Now, the way we style this div would be we come in the style sheet, and the way we access any specific class is by using this period symbol followed by the name of the class, in this case box1. Now, if I were to use ID, I would have written this pound symbol or hash mash, whatever you may call, and then I would have written the name of the ID, box1. Now, even you can have different name or same name to the classes and IDs. It wouldn't make any difference if you have different name or same name. Now, since I have this down, so period and box1, now we can just style it. And here, first thing that I'm going to change is the background. Now, background color, I want it to have a bit dark, so let's add black, which is 30, and yeah, this is black. Now as you can see, there is, so these texts are basically attached to the border, which I don't want. So for this, I'm going to add a bit of padding. So now padding and margin, I'll just explain in a bit, so you don't need to worry about. I'll just explain what padding and margin do. So I'll just add 20 pixels of padding, and this is what it would look. And I'll add a bit of margin, so 20 pixels. Okay, so this is what it looks now. And then yeah, the next thing that I want to add to this is border. So border is basically this, the outer border of the div. Now, so the border takes in three things. The first, the size of the border. I want to add 2-pixel border. The second one is solid, since I want it solid. And the third is the color. Now, as far as the color goes, you can use same like background color and the normal color. You can use RGB, RGBA, hexadecimal, or the name. Now I'll use white, so I'll just name it white. And now if I save, you can see that the boundaries of this div now have a border of 2 pixel. Now you can do it separately, like you can have the border name or border color, and then you can add the color. Now if I write here black, not black, blue. Now if I save, as I've said, that if you have any same property that gets repeated, the letter 1 will take into effect, meaning that the new one would take into effect. Now this is the new one, the border color. Now this white would go invalid, and now this blue will come and take its place. And if I save, you can see that now it's blue. So you can remove this if you don't want. So this is what it would look. Now I'll just use comments, and I'll just comment it out so that you can see. Oops. Yeah. So this is border color, and the next thing that I want to show is border radius. Now border radius is basically, it adds a bit of roundness to the borders. Now if I write here 20 pixel, so as you can see, this is the, now wait a sec, the color changed. I need to add white again. Yeah. So as you can see, the edges are a bit curved now. This is because we have a border radius of 20 pixels. And now again, instead of pixels, you can use border radius in percents, meaning if I write here 10%, now if I save, this would have this. So this is how it would look like when you have a 10% of border radius. Now let's keep it back to pixels. Yeah. So the next thing that I want to show is height and the width. Now height, let's add 200 pixel and the width to 400. Now these values would make the div a fixed, meaning that this div would have a fixed height and width now. Now if I save, you can see that when the screen is of this size, it has this specific size or format. And now when I make the browser go full screen, it still has the same size. So this is what you would say a div having a static height and width. Now, if you want to make it go responsive, meaning that you want your div to adjust itself as the size of the browser, so you can use, instead of pixels, use percentages. Now, pixels give you fixed value, and percents help you to get a bit more responsive behavior. So instead of 400 pixel, if I add here 70%, now if I save, so this is what it would look like when the browser is this, and this is 70% of the browser. And now if I stress out a bit, as you can see, the div adjusts itself according to the size of the browser. So this is a responsive div now. Now, in place of percents, you can use another format, which is viewport width, or if you want to use height, that would be viewport height. So this is basically, let's say, your screen. So it could be this, or you could have it in full screen, whatever. So no matter what is the size of your browser, so it's going to adjust and have, so if you want to use heights as an example, so in your heights, let's say you have 100 equal horizontal lines or horizontal boxes, you could say, which fill out the screen entirely. And now if I were to write, instead of 200 pixel, if I write here 30 viewport height, now if I save, now it's going to take the 30 boxes that fill out horizontally the screen. In this case, it would be somewhere around till here. Okay. Now if I write here 50 viewport height, now this would be the half of the screen. Okay, the same you can use for the width. Now for width, if I write here 70% or 70 viewport width, that means that I'm taking in 70 vertical lines, 70 equal vertical boxes of the screen, meaning somewhat till here. Okay, as you can see, even if you have it in full screen, it's going to still make it response. So this is fixed height and responsive height and width of any div. Now let's make it back to pixels, 200 pixels, and here as percents. Okay, so this is width and the height. Now let's go and talk a little bit about margin and padding. So I have here a image. So this is the image. Now this is the content. So if you're starting off with CSS, get really confused with margin and padding because they find it a bit tricky, and even few who have built a couple of projects with CSS, they still get confused with margin and padding. So now if you do not understand this portion, you can just rewatch this part to get it clear. Now I'll try my best to explain it as simple as I can. So if you do not understand, as I've said, you can rewatch the portion. Now a padding would be the gapping or the space between the content and the border of whichever element you are applying a padding to. Now here I have added a 20 pixel padding to the box 1. Now this box 1 is the div which contains both this h1 and p, meaning that this is the content inside this div. Now when I add 20 pixel of padding, that means that the content would have a gapping of 20 pixels from the outer border. So this is what padding does. And margin is basically the gapping or the space between the element which you are applying to and the element that is right outside this element, or you could say the element that has this element onto which you're applying the margin. Now since I'm applying the margin to this div, so since it is inside this body, now this body would have a gapping of 20 pixels. So let me see, yeah, so 20 pixels of gapping from this body to this div. Okay, so this is what a margin does. So now you can think of a margin to this div and a padding to this body, kind of same. Now the way you add a margin or padding, 2. So this is the margin. Now you can add them separately. So like I have the padding here of 20 pixels, meaning that each side, like top, right, bottom, and left, would have a padding of 20 pixels each. Now if you want to add them separately, meaning that like padding top, you want it to have a padding of 30 pixel. Now if I save, now the top has a 30 pixel padding. As I've said, that any new property that you write overrides the old value. So I have a padding here. So now padding, and this padding also includes padding top of 20 pixel. And now since you're applying separately padding top as 30 pixel, now the padding of the top would be 30 pixel now. So you can add padding left, padding right, padding bottom, and all the stuff. And so if you want to add separately each of these in one go, then these follow clockwise direction, meaning that the first value that you write would take this top. Now I want the top to have 40 pixel, the right to have 30 pixel, the bottom to have 50 pixels, and the left to have 100 pixels. Now if I save, this is what it would look like. Okay, now let's remove it. The same way you can add the margin, and I wouldn't show this. Let's show margin left and 100 pixels. So this is what it would look like when you have margin left 100 pixels. Okay, so at this point we know about margin and padding. Now what I'm going to do, since our website looks a bit empty, now what I'm going to do, I'll just fill this with another div. So I'll just copy this and paste it here. Now if I save, since this has this box1 class, and as we have already styled the box1, now this is identical to this one. So we want to style this separately, so we're going to name this class2 and have the ID as box2. Now when we save, the style would go away because we still haven't styled the box2. Now what we're going to do, we're going to style box2 here on style.css page. And here what we're going to do, the first thing that I want to do is add a width of 80%. And then the next thing I want to do is add a padding, or let's add a border first. So border of 2 pixel. Let's add dotted border, and would be of color white. Okay. Now as you can see, the text are pretty much attached to the border, which we do not want. So for this we can add a padding of 20 pixels. And let's move this box2 div to the center. So to move this to the center, what we can do, we can add margin on the left side as auto. Now what this does is basically it pushes everything to the right, meaning that this box would now go to the right, as you can see. And then we want to add margin right to auto. Now if I save, now this margin right auto, what it does, it basically pushes the box to the left. And now since each of these are pushing the box to left and right, now this is going to make the box appear in the center. Now as you can see, I have added this to box1, and thus it appears in the center. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to change the font family, and this is what I want, and I'll save. So this looks different. Now we're going to see how to style the unordered list or any list, but generally you would use unordered list in your website. So we're going to see how to style that. So for this we want a div of categories, you may call. So in VS Code you can just add the period and the name of the class and hit enter. It should give you the class with the div. And the next thing we want to add is a UL. Let's give the UL a class of list, and let's add the LIs, and we want to add each LI with this specific class name, which is list items. And we want 5 of these, so I want to add times and 5 and hit enter. Now this is going to give me 5 LIs with list item as the class name. Now since each of these would be same, thus we have class item as the same class of each individual LIs. Now next thing that I want to add is an A tag inside here, and I want the location or the href to be pound. So whenever you click the link, it's going to bring you back to this index.html file. And we want to add here saying item 1. And as you can see, the first thing that appeared is item 1. Now I'll just copy this and I'll just paste it here. Okay, now let's style this box 3, which is categories. I'll just go here, and the first thing that we want to do is same as these two, is add a border. The border would be 2 pixel solid, and this time red. Okay, now let's add a fixed width to this. So width would be 300 pixels, and let's push this to this a bit to the right. So we're gonna write margin left and 50 pixels. Okay, and let's add a margin so that, as you can see, these two borders are like totally attached to each other, which we do not want. So we want to write margin top 20 pixels. Okay. Now by default, the UL or the unordered list has a bit of padding here, as you can see, which we don't want. So let's remove that. So for this, what we're going to do is, if you want to grab onto the UL with its name, class name, which is list, and I'm going to say is padding to 0. Now when I save, as you can see, it has no padding, but these bullet points are now outside this box. Now let's remove these bullet points. So to remove that, you can write list style type, and here none. Now these not have any list styles. Okay, then what we want to do, we want to push everything to the center. So we can write text align and add center. All right. Okay, now let's change these colors to white. So for this, what I'm going to do, now if you change the color here to white, now this wouldn't take into effect. The reason is because these item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are no longer any regular text now, just because they are wrapped inside the li. Now you cannot use color, even if you use, it wouldn't work on these because these are now links. Now the only way to change the color is changing the color inside the a tag. So we want to grab onto the list items, this, and write a, meaning that each link inside this list item would have a color of white. And now, as you can see, these have a bit of underlining, so we can remove that with text decoration none. And now let's add border. So border bottom 2 pixel solid red. Now here we want the border, the list item. Yeah. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the list items, and here the first thing that we want to change is the line height, 30 pixels, and then we want to have a border bottom 2 pixel solid red. Now as you can see, each specific li have its own border. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is remove the border, this border. Now this item 5, as you can see, this has this border which we do not want, as the first one doesn't have, so this looks a bit weird. So the way we grab onto this is by saying list item, and then we use this colon, and then we write nth child. Okay, and then here we pass which li we want to target, or which list item we want to target. Now this is the first child, this is the second, third, fourth, and fifth, as this is the fifth list item. So we want to grab onto this, so we can write here 5, and what we don't want inside here is a border. So border bottom none. Now if you save, as you can see, the border from this number 5 is now gone. Now if you click onto these, now as you can see, your location has this pound symbol here because it redirects us to this same page. Okay, so now we're going to see the 3 states of any link in CSS. So basically the links in HTML have 3 states. The first is hover, the second is active, and the third is visited. So now first what I'm going to do, I'll just grab onto these item links. So what I can do is I can write list item, and then all the a tag inside list item would be this. And then the hover state is basically I add in a colon and I write hover. And then inside here, you can do the styling. Now, hover state is basically when you take your cursor over any link, that is the hover state. Now, you can mess up and have your own styling, but as of now, I'll just add a color of red. So now, again, you can add in different stuff, like you can change the font, you can have different effects, animation and stuff, but just for explaining, I'll just add in this color. Now, when I save this, whenever you hover over these, as you can see, from white, they turn to red. Now the second state is the active state, which is I just grab this and add a colon and active. Now, active state is basically when you click onto any link. That is basically that brief moment is we call this active moment of any link. So now you can add in your own styling again, but I'll add a color of yellow. Now, whenever I click onto any of these links, just for an instance, you'd see that from red they turn to yellow. So it just flashes out. So as you can see, this just flashes yellow and then changes back, as you can see. Okay, so this is what happens. Now the third state is the visited state. All right, A and visited. Now visited state is basically if you have already visited any location, and then you can have that specific link have different style. So now as I have already visited this pound location, which is basically the same website over and over again, even if I haven't clicked any of these links, I might have clicked only 1 or 3 or 2, and if I miss out 5 or 4, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have visited this location, you can have all the links have different colors. So now if I add orange and if I save, since I have visited href this pound location, all of these would have orange color. Now if I add a different link here, now let's add a list item and have this location to something else like about.html. And if I save, now as you can see, this doesn't have that orange color because we still haven't visited this about.html page. So now I'll leave it be. And so the next thing we're going to see is how to style a form in CSS. Okay, so I have added the HTML stuff for form, and I have added a class of form to this form, and we have this label for first name and input for first name. So I have added the ID and name as fname, and then I have added this label for last name and for this. So you can do this, and then I have text area, so for message. And what I'm going to do, I'll add a couple other of these. So I'll just copy this and add in here, and I'll add a BR, and this would be for password. Okay, and I'll just add here password, and here also password, and ID would be password, same would be for the name. Okay, yeah, and then I have added a submit button of this. So this is the submit button, and now let's style this in CSS. Now the first thing that I want to do is have a bit of padding to the form. So I'll point to the form class and let's add a width of 400 pixels. Okay, and then margin of 50 pixels. Okay, then border of 2 pixels solid, and I want to have white border. And then let's add padding of 20 pixels. Now let's style these. So first we want to style the input areas. As you can see, these are pretty small. So first what I'm going to do is I'll write form, and then inside here all the input. So I can write input here, and then what I'm going to do is I want all the inputs to have a width of around 300 pixels. Yeah, and then a height of around 60 pixels. How would that be? Too big. 40 pixels, I guess. Yeah, and then I want each of these to have margin. Now margin would be 10 pixels each. Okay, as you can see, these have margin of 10 pixels. And the next thing I'm going to do is, as you can see, when you click onto any of these, you can see you get this border somewhat kind of. So we can remove that. So border none, we don't want any border, neither do we want any outline. So outline none. Now when you click, you don't have anything. So let's add a padding to each of these input so that whenever you type something, they don't start from this section. Okay, you have a bit of spacing to write some stuff. So not here, I want to write padding over here. So padding of 10 pixels, and we want it from left. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is style this text area and have a placeholder. So in this, we can write placeholder, and we can write here message. Okay. And what you can do, instead of adding these labels, now I'll just remove these labels, and yeah, I'll just remove these labels. And instead of these, what I'm going to do is I'll add placeholder to each of these. So placeholder for first name, just copy this, because placeholder look a bit better than labels in my opinion. So last name, and password would be placeholder password. You would have another input for the username, which I haven't added. So yeah, this looks better. Now what we want is we want this to be all these stuff to be on the center. So to do that, actually I'll just keep it like that. So what I'm gonna do next is form, and I wanna access this text area. So for this I can just write text area, or you can also use the IDs that we have added there. So I'll just write here margin of 10 pixels, so that all these inputs, they kind of line up together. Okay. And then we also want to remove the border and outline. So I'll add outline to none. Okay, this looks better. Now let's add a width to this, or yeah, let's leave it like that. And now let's add a width. Yeah, width of 300 pixels, and padding left of 10 pixels. Okay. Now as you can see, this submit button, let's style this. So this would be form, and you want to access the submit button, which is an input. And then what you can do, you can use these square brackets, and then you can write type. So these are submit type, submit. Now this would specifically mean that you're trying to access this submit button, which is this input. Now again, if you want to access this, you can use ID or any class, but I'll just go with this way. And then to style this, you can let's add a bit of this background. I want background to be black. Okay. And outline none, border radius, no, border none, and then width to be 300 pixel, and which is already 300 pixel, because when we write here input, it means that all the input, meaning that this would also be applicable to this, which is the submit input. Now again, what we want to do is change the color. So the color I want to have white. Font family to be no, let's leave it be. Let's add a font weight of 700. Okay, that looks better. And let's add a font family, and we'll use this. Okay. And the next thing that I want to do is font size 20 pixels, and yeah. And then what I want to do is shrink this to 300. 350 would be better. Yeah. No, I guess 340. Yeah, 340 would be better. Yeah, this looks better. Now what I want to do is when you hover over it, we want to have a different effect. So to add that, what we can do, we can just copy this portion, paste it in here, and add a colon, and write hover. When you hover, what we want to do is we want to change the background color or background to white, and then now the text, which is the color, would be now black. Now if I save, and when you hover, as you can see, they just change places. Okay. And yeah, let's add width to be 300 pixels. Oops, 310 I believe, because we have a padding on the left side. Yeah. So this is how we style form. And now again, as you can see, these placeholders have fonts which are kind of small. So to change that, what you can do is you can write form input and then placeholder. You can access the placeholder using double colon and then writing placeholder. And what you want to do is first change the font family to be this, font size to be around 18 pixels. Okay, now let's make it 16. That's better, I guess. Yeah, and then you can again change the color. You can have different color to this. So yeah, I'll leave it be. Just like this. And now let's change the placeholder of the text area. Just copy this and I'll paste it in here. And instead of input, I'll just write text area. And I'll just copy this and I'll paste it in here. Okay, so this is your form in CSS. Okay, so now we're going to be seeing how to align stuff with CSS. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is, as you can see, that this form is kind of stuck to the bottom. Now, so for that, I'm going to add a div. Now this div, I'll add a style of margin bottom of around 500 pixels. Okay, now what this would allow me to have is that now I have more room to scroll. Okay, now to show you guys the align and all this stuff, first thing that I'm going to do is create a box. I believe this is box 3. Okay, so box 3, and this box would have two separate boxes inside. Now this would be box mini box 1. Well, let's call these mini box, and I'm gonna have two of these. Okay, and inside these I'll just add in an h1 hello, oops, hello, and then a paragraph of a little bit dummy text. Okay, and then I'll just copy this and I'll then paste it in here. Okay, now as you can see, by default these just go one top of other. Now let's say you want to align these horizontally, meaning that you want one box to be around here and then the other right next to it. So to do that, what we can do, so first we're gonna access this box 3, and so first let's add in a width to this. Now we want this to stretch out completely, so we can write 100 viewport width. Now this means that you want the box 3 to totally take the entire width of the screen, and then I want a height of around 300 pixels. Okay, and that's all, I guess. And then now we're gonna access this, the mini box. Now both of these have the same name, the same class name, so mini box. And now what I'm gonna do is I'll write here float left, and then I'll add a width of 50%, and let's add in a padding here of around 20 pixels. Okay, now if I save, as you can see that once I add float left, now what's going to happen, the first box would just go and get stuck to the left hand side around here. And then since both of these have the same name, same class name, and mini box has float left, so then the second box would come in and then join the first box and then just get attached itself to its left. Now this is its left. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'll add in here a bit of padding. First let's add a border of 1 pixel, solid and black. Now if I save, as you can see that as soon as I add 1 pixel of border, now this moves down. Now the reason it moved down is because now the width is no longer 50%. The reason is that we have added 1 pixel border, and so the length or the width of this is more than 50%. And then each of these have a width more than 50%, and so they can't take this width. They can't have the horizontal alignment. So to get over that, what we can do, we can write box sizing to border box. Now border box, what it does, it basically takes inside this border, and then if you have any padding or stuff, let's add a bit of padding of 10 pixels. Now what it's going to do, it's going to add the padding and border inside this 50%. It means that whatever extra stuff you add won't exceed this 50%. Okay, so everything would get included in this width, and hence as you can see that these are now aligned here just like this. Okay, and yeah, so width, let's make it 90 viewport width. Yeah, that's better. Okay, So this is your float left. Now, since these two have the same width, now let's say you have a main section and then you have a side section or the sidebar which you want to add. So for this, I'll just add a box 3, box 4, I guess, yeah, box 4, and then here I'm gonna have a main section which would have h1, hello world, and dummy text, paragraph lorem, enter, and then there's gonna be a side section, or you can add sidebar. I'll just remove this and I'll lower the text. Yeah. Okay. Now, as you can see, by default, they are on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is first go and grab box 4 and then add in a width of, width of 80, viewport width, and then padding of 10 pixels. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I want this main section to have 70% width and then this to have around 30%. So to have that, what I can do is I can write main section, and this would have, first let's add float right, and then a width of around 70%. Okay. And yeah, and then I want the side section to have, not float right, I want this to float left, and this to be float right, and have a width of 30%. Now if I save, as you can see, these just go down. Now to have, we can write box sizing to border box, and I'll just copy this, paste it in here. Okay, now even if we save this, you can see that these do not get aligned. The reason is because I have made a mistake. Okay, yeah, so now as you can see, these are aligned properly, and so what I'm going to do is I'll just add in this side section a background color of wait, does C, and then a color of white. Yeah, that's okay. And yeah, let's add padding of 30 per 30 pixels. 30 pixels. Yeah, this looks better. So this is what it would look like when you have a 70% width of main section and then a 30% width of this. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now next we're going to be talking about the positioning. Now there are a couple of ways you can position stuff. So the first is static. And then what static does is basically, by default, HTML elements are positioned in this position, that is static position. And static elements are not affected by top, left, bottom, right properties, meaning you can't position them in any way, okay? And then there is relative. Now, what is relative? Any element with relative positioning is positioned relative to its original place. Now, in relative positioning, we can set the top, right, bottom, and left position property, which will cause the element to adjust away from its actual position. Now, things might seem a bit messy, but I'll just go and show you guys each of these. Now, the third way to position is fixed. Now, fixed elements are basically fixed on the screen, meaning that no matter how you scroll, those elements would just remain stuck to the screen, okay? And then you have absolute, which these elements are basically are positioned relative to any of their parent position elements, and then we can adjust and move and position them any way we want, but it should be relative to its parent position element. And then there are two other, that is initial and inherit. So now initial basically lets elements have their default values, and inherit basically lets the element have the values from their parents. Okay, now I'm going to go in depth into each of these. Now to explain that, what I'm going to do is first I'll have a div and I'll call it position, and then what I'm going to do is I'll have h1 hello and then h2, or let's make it yeah, I guess h2 would be better, of world. Okay, now if I save, these are the ones. And now one more thing, so after you have done floating and stuff, you need to create a div with whatever class name you want. So, but I'll write clear fix, and here what I'm going to do is I'll write clear fix, and I'll write clear both. Now, basically, you want to have this because whenever you use floats, now as you might have seen, if I don't have this, the position is pretty much messed up. So when you have, oops, when you have this, you have everything settled and you have a good layout. Okay. So every time you use floats, you want to do this. And so I'll just add this right above box 4 since we have used floating over there. And now if I save, okay, that should be fine. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is grab onto the position box, position, and have a width of around 400 pixels and a height of 400 pixels. And I want to give it a border, border of 2 pixel solid white. So this is the one. Okay, and then let's add a bit of margin. So margin 40 pixels. Okay. Now by default, h1, this hello and this world is static. So if I grab onto the h1 position h1, and if I add top of 100 pixels, now if I save, you wouldn't see any changes because in static you cannot add any specific position properties like top, bottom, left, and right. You cannot add those. Now if you want to add any of these, so you need to add position relative, and now if you write top 50 pixels, now relative to its original place, it's going to move 50 pixels. Now if you add 100 pixels, then from its original place, it's going to move 100 pixel down. Okay, so this is relative. Now the next that I want to show is position absolute. Now if I write your position absolute and add a top of around 50 pixels, as you can see, the hello vanished. Now you need to remember that whenever you are adding position absolute, so it adjusts itself to its parent element, which has a relative value. Now if I just scroll up, as you can see, the hello from this box went right over here, and then from the top of the screen, it went down 50 pixels. It's because if none of its parent elements have any relative positioning, so what it's going to do, it's going to take the HTML document, and then it's going to set that as its relative parent, and then it's going to move top 50%, 50 pixels according to that. Okay, so now what you want to do is add in here position relative. So what this is going to do is that now this box is its parent with position relative. And now if I save it, now this is its relative position, I mean the relative parent. And then when I save, now this world, this hello world, the hello section is now the hello h1, I mean, is now 50%, 50 pixels from the top. Now again, you can mess it up with this. Now if I add here top 0 pixels, now the top would be right over here. Okay, and you can add whatever you want. You can add bottom 0 pixel, and let's remove this. And if I save, now the hello would be at the bottom of this. Okay, and then you can add left 100 pixels, and now this would bring the hello from the left, somewhere from here, 100 pixels. Okay, you can have I don't know, like top 50%. Now this is going to be around 50% from the top. Now if you want to add the hello to the center, so what you can do, you can write position absolute to whatever element you want to center, and then you can add top 50%. Now this is going to bring that element from the top to 50%, and then left 50%. And now if I save, as you can see, this is not at the center. Now what you want to do is you want to move this around somewhere around here. So to move this element, we can write transform and translate. So we want to translate this around its x-axis. The first value is x-axis of 50% minus 50% because we want this to be somewhat around here. Okay, and then we also want the y-axis to be somewhere around here, so like 50%. Now if I save, now the hello is at the center of this box. Okay, So this is how you position stuff. And about the floating, the alignment, so you can use flexbox and grid, which are not covered in this video because those are pretty long topic, which I'll make separate videos for each of these. And when I release those, you can learn flexbox and then the grid stuff in those specific videos. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to see the position fixed one. Okay, so now in CSS, you can also style the buttons. So let's add here a button, and this button would have, let's add a class of btn and hey there. Okay, now if I save, you have this hey there over here. Now let's style this, so I can write btn, and then what I can do is, first thing that I want to do is add a padding of 20 pixels so that these texts have a bit of padding. Okay, and let's make it to 10, and then I want it to have a background of black and color of white. Okay, all right, and I'm going to remove, as you can see, it has this outline and border, that with outline none and border none. Okay, and let's save it, and now our button doesn't have any outline and border. Now we want to position this fixed, so to have that we can write position and we can write here fixed. And then what it's going to do, you can add top, left, and all those properties. Now these properties would be according to the viewport of the browser, basically the screen of the browser or the window. So if I write here top of top around 500 pixels, now if I save, now from this portion 500 would be around here. Okay, now no matter how much you scroll, this would get stuck over here, and then whatever you do, it's going to be 500 pixel from the top. You can reduce this to 300. Okay, so you might have seen in many websites that they have the social media links like Facebook, Twitter, and all those stuff. So they use this position fixed, and then they add in the different like the position properties like top, left, and all those stuff. So you can add that with this help. And the next thing that I want to show is the pseudo selectors. So I have already shown you guys one of those as this, the nth child, which I believe I used. Okay, so I grabbed on to the fifth list item with this. So there are two more. So if you want to grab the first li this, so to do that you can just write list item, and then you can use colon and you can write first child, and then you can style it, and this would style the first, and you can also style the last with last child. Okay, so there are these two, and the video is quite long. Now the next thing that I want to do is build a short website with the help of whatever we have learned so far. So I've created my website.html file and website css.css file so that I can add this in this file. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is get the broiler template, and here this document I'm going to call this Hank the Tank. Okay, just my name. And the next thing that I'm going to do is link the CSS. So website css this, and yeah. So if you have the CSS file in a different folder, then you would need to write the name of the folder. Let's say CSS followed by this, and then you write the name of the CSS file. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is the first thing that we need to do in our website is add the name of the site. So I'm going to write site name, okay, or logo you can call this, and use an H1, and this would say Hank. Okay, and then wait, hold on a sec. Yeah, and then we want to get the nav bar. So nav bar, here I'm going to add ul and 3 lis or 4 lis, and each of these would have a link tag with href to pound, and here first would be home, and then I'll just copy this and paste it in here. About services, and then contact. Okay, so that's our nav bar. And then we want to have our showcase area. So the showcase. And here I want to add a background image. So I haven't shown you guys how to add background image. I'll be showing you guys that. And then I want a few text. So I'll add h3 and then I'll add lorem and a few text. Okay. I'll remove some of these. All right. Okay. So we have our showcase, and then we want to have a main bar, which would have h3 with welcome to our website, and then it's gonna have few dummy text. Okay, and then we can have a sidebar. This sidebar wouldn't have this h3, this heading, so this is our sidebar. And then we want to add our footer. So footer would be with the HTML semantic tag footer, and here just write inside the h3, I believe, hang the tag ampersand copy and this 2020. Okay, so this is our beautiful website. Now all we need to do is add in CSS styling. So inside this, I'm gonna write hang the tag. Okay, now let's style this. So we go to our CSS file, and first what we want to do is we want to remove any by default margin that any element might have, and then we want to remove the padding, and then we also want to have box sizing to border box. Okay, and then I'm gonna have body font family. Let's use Sigu. Okay, and then background of kind of a bit dark, light gray stuff, and that's all for the body. Now let's design our logo. So we want to have our logo a bit. We want to have a bit of margin over here, so we can write site name. Yeah, site name was it? Okay, and I'm gonna add here margin of 10 pixels. Let's add 20. Not 10 is better. And then a width of 100%. And instead of margin, I want to add here padding. Yeah. Okay, so width, not 100%, 100 viewport width. And here in the body, I want width to be equal to 100 viewport width, meaning that we want it to consume the entire screen width. And then height, not height, a min height, that is a minimum height, should be of 100 viewport height. Okay, so this is the width, and then border, bottom, 2 pixels solid, and we want black. Okay, let's remove this, let's add background black and color to be white. Okay, and then we're going to style our nav bar. So for the nav bar, what we want to do is bring these links to make this inline. So the first thing that we want to do is set a width to the nav bar, width of 100 viewport width, and then we want to get the UL inside of this and have list style none. Okay, so this would remove the bullet points, and then we want to have padding of 20 pixels. Okay, and yeah, now for the nav UL list items, we're gonna have display inline, meaning that we don't want each of these to be block. We want them to be inline. Hold on a sec. Yeah, so nav bar, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so we want them to be inline, and then we want to have these have margin of 20 pixels. Okay, and then we want the background to be white, not this. Control X and get here. All right, and then now we want to style the the links. So LIA, and first we want to remove text decoration to none, and then color to be black. Okay, and then we're gonna have font size to be 18 pixels and font weight to be around 700. Okay, now for the showcase area, what I'm gonna do is I'll grab one of the showcase and then add a width. So 100 viewport width and a height of around 400 pixels. Let's reduce this to 300. Okay, that's still big. Yeah, let it be. And then what we want to do is first let's add the background image, and then in the URL we want to set the location. So I don't have any folder created. I just have this img.jpg file. So I'll just write here JPEG. But if you have any specific folder, then you just write let's say the name of the folder is images. Then you write images, hit a backslash, and then the name. So this is the image, and it appears to be kind of dark, so you can't see the font. So I write color white. Now you have a couple of properties for this. Now the first thing that we want to do is background repeat to no repeat. So this means that this background image has a property of background repeat to repeat, meaning that this image gets repeated over and over again, which you don't want to do. And then you want to set background position to be center and center. Okay, and I don't know why this looks let's write top right. Nah, this looks weird. Bottom. Hold on a sec, I think I will grab some other image. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll use this image, and so this background position, this lets you kind of to add the position of the background. So what I'm going to do is add background size and use cover. Now this has filled in the entire image, and so this is what it looks. Now what I'm going to do is add the text to the center. So I'm going to grab the, also what I'm going to do is padding top, or no, let's just go and showcase, and I'll grab onto the H3 and add margin top of around like 50 pixels, or wait, around 100. Yeah, what the hell? Oh, wait, it's getting pulled up from there. So now we need to bring this image a bit down. So to do that, I'll write showcase and this text. So for this H3, and I'll write position absolute, and I'll make this position relative. And then I'll write top 50%. Okay, and as you can see that it is still not the center. So I'll write translate transform translate y minus 50%. Now this should bring everything at top and center, I mean. And then we're going to add a margin of 20 pixels. Yeah, what about 30? Yeah, this is better. And so this is it, and I'll add a line height of around 40 pixels. How would that be? Yeah. Okay, so this is our showcase, and let's push this 80. Yeah, that's better. And now we need to work on our main bar. So what was the name? Main bar. Yeah, so main bar, and we're gonna have this around a width of 500 pixels width, and then a height of around I would add here 60%, and height of this would be around 300 pixels, or I'd add 400 would be better, I guess. And I'll add some more content over here. Oh, not here. Lorem and 50. Okay. And this to 350. Okay. And then I'll add float left. And then what I'm going to do is I'll add sidebar, and I'll just take these and copy, paste it here, and this would be 40%, and height would be 350, and this would be right. And I would add padding of 20 pixels and margin of 10 pixels. Okay. And box sizing to border box. Copy this and I'll paste it in here. Same goes for, let's remove the margin. Yeah, I should come back over here and I'll add padding of 20 pixels. Okay, now let's add a background to this. So background, I want to have a bit dark, so I'll add this, and the color to be white. And I want these to take the full width, full height, I mean, so I'll add line height of around 50 pixels. Now that's a bit more higher, yeah, 30 pixels, and this is our sidebar and main bar, and I'm gonna add here h3. That's what we were doing, I guess. And this, I want to have a margin bottom, or let's add margin of 20 pixels. Okay. All right. And we want to clear out the float. So let's add a div right next to this, clear, fix, and let's give it a style over here. So I'm going to say clear both. Okay. All right. Now on to the next, which is the footer. So okay, so now as you can see that the footer is somewhere here, and then you have all these tags flowing out. So to remove that, what we can do, we can just write here overflow hidden, and then the text would go away, and would write padding bottom of 10 pixels. Okay, that didn't work, I guess. Hold on. Okay, wait. Margin bottom of 20 pixels. Okay, that's better. Now let's style our footer. So this, we want to do it here. So footer, we're going to add a height of around 60 pixels. Yeah, and then width of 100 viewport width, and then text align center, so that this is at the center, and then margin top 20 pixels. Okay, and a background of black and color white. Okay, and padding top of 20 pixels. All right, and we'll just remove few text from this, from our main bar. Yeah, few more, I guess. Okay, so that's better. So this is our website. Okay, pretty simple with just CSS. So now, as you can see, if we keep on pushing this, at this point, this starts to overflow, which we don't want. So what we can do, we can just bring this down and have this take the entire width. So for this, we want to add something called as media query. right, media, and I'm gonna write for max width, and the width we want to select as 600 pixels. So meaning that all the styling that we do inside here would only take into effect if the width is a maximum width is 600 pixels. Okay. So what we want to do is first is main bar. I'm gonna have the width to 100% and float to none. And then for the sidebar, I'm gonna do the same. So sidebar. Okay. Now when you just push this to this, you have this, and as you can see, this is pretty. The height is, to be exact, is pretty long, so we don't want that. So let's reduce its height to uh, 200 pixels, I guess. Yeah, and then we also want to remove this. So footer. Let's remove this from here. Margin top. This. Okay, this is better. So this is your responsive website. So at this point, it's good, but comes to here, you have these come on top of each other. Okay, so this is your responsive website with CSS. So I believe that's it for this video. So I hope you guys learned a lot. The video was quite long, and so that's it for today. So if you guys like this video, make sure to drop a like. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe my channel. Turn on the notification bell to remain updated whenever I post a new video. And so I have a couple other videos on the screen. So if you are interested, you can watch those. Those are pretty amazing, and I'll meet you there in that video. So thanks for watching.